Hello everybody, my name is Nootmad and welcome to episode 5 of my Trash or Treasure series. Today we're going over the Brightside shotgun. It's a legendary shotgun manufactured by TDL. And yeah, in this video we're going to go over how to get the gun, what its strengths and weaknesses are, and then give my overall thoughts on this weapon. But before we continue though, I just want to remind you guys that I test guns just like this over on my Twitch channel. So if you're keen on jumping in and hanging out with me while I do just that, I'll be putting a link to my Twitch channel in the description down below. And with all that said and done, let's learn some things, shall we? So, the Brightside. What is it and how do you get it? Well, the Brightside is a TDL shotgun and it's quite an interesting one at that. In order to get it, you have to go farm the Bronsons in the Blast Plains. They're a bounty target and you can find them in DLC 3. And yeah, like I said, it's a very interesting weapon. What it does is, quite obviously it's a standard TDL shotgun, you throw it and it explodes, but it's what it does after the explosion that it makes it pretty powerful. And what it does is that upon that explosion, it splits into 4 other mini Brightsides that shoot bullets in one of each element. So it splits into 4, so you get a cryo one, you get a shock, you get radiation, and so on and so forth. And yeah, it shoots multiple elements from each of those guns, and those bullets it fires count as actual bullets. And because of that, it can proc things like Minesweeper micronades, provided you crit, and it can also proc short fuse. So both of those combined, you can tell that this gun does some pretty filthy damage, especially on Moes. So, as far as the stats go, you can see on the card that the base damage is fairly high for a TDL shotgun, and obviously the rest of the stats don't really matter except for magazine size. Things like accuracy and reload time don't really matter on a TDL because you just spam it and spamming it anyway. But yeah, the magazine size is fairly standard for a TDL weapon, TDL shotgun, sorry, and it's the base damage that is what we're after. So yeah, that's basically the stats out of the way. And as far as the elements go, like I mentioned, it spawns in kinetic, but the mini Brightside that spawns after the explosion can shoot out multiple different elements, so there's your coverage there. As far as anoints go, quite obviously, the standard 2, 390, and consecutive hits. Obviously, I'd suggest use the 390 variant for mobbing, and consecutive hits for bossing. In the background gameplay right now, I'm using the Brightside in the 390 variant, and as you can see, it is doing an absolute ton of damage, even with the initial explosions, and when it does the splitting and hits the enemies, even those are doing fairly significant damage too. So yeah, overall, the gun is really solid, and I guess we'll just break it down into its pros and cons now. So, obviously, one of the pros is that it has a very high base damage, and second to that, its damage is very consistent when you pair it with a Minesweeper nade. Now, that might not sound too special considering Minesweeper nade makes anything work, but honestly with the way this gun performs and with the amount of explosions you can create with it, it's very, very good. Now, as far as the negatives go, there's about 2, and one of them is fairly significant and is something you'll have to build around, and that is its splash radius. So when you throw it, it does explode, and that explosion already has a very high radius, and if you were to boost it any further through things like torque cross promotion, you are almost always going to down yourself without a doubt. So if you plan on using this gun on Moes, I highly suggest avoiding torque cross promotion completely, or at the very least don't buff it by more than just 2 or 3 points. Any more than that and you're just going to constantly down yourself and it's just not going to become fun to use this gun. So yeah, make sure you don't buff the splash radius too much, but as you can see in the background gameplay, it's not too much of an issue. The damage is more than enough and it doesn't really require really large AoE to be able to perform to its maximum potential. The second negative of this is that it's mediocre at bossing, just because for most bosses in this game it is fairly hard to hit a crit spot with a gun that you can't really aim, and by that I mean you can't aim where the Brightside mini Brightside splits shoot, so obviously it's got to be very hard to maintain that Minesweeper damage consistency. So yeah, it does fall off in that regard, but of course just for mobbing, as you can see in the background gameplay, this gun is absolutely flawless for that. But yeah, with that out of the way, that's basically my opinion and thoughts on the gun. If you guys have any other thoughts on this gun or figured out that I may have missed something else, feel free to let me know in the comments down below. But yeah, with that, the end of the video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya.